Good evening, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you again for coming back. Today is April the 4th, April the 1st, 2022. Welcome back. So I start by to share just a little bit, not too much today, some news on humanitarian situation in Tigray, especially the Georgian Assembly expressing anger, frustration on that issue, are raising their voice, expressing their frustration. So I will start with that video. Also, another video on the killing of 26 militia in East Shore zone. So killing is very common in Ethiopia now, just blaming each other and no accountability at all. There is also other from U.S. State Department press release on the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Afar region and the Tigray. Couple of points. So thank you again for coming back. Let's start with the Georgia State Assembly expressing their frustration in the Tigray region. Actually, all over Ethiopia is problem under Abiy Ahmed, especially in Oromia region, especially in Oromia. Since Abiy came to power, since 2018, Oromia region sealed from international media, from international attention, and people are, burned alive, inside their house. So many atrocities happening in Oromia. So, we appreciate the Georgian senators expressing their concern in the Tigray region. We wish, they also express similar attention happening in other areas. Nowhere is peace. Nowhere is there is no stability anywhere in Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed leadership. So I hope the international community will act on humanitarian ground, and shorten the lifespan of this government. I hope so. The longer this government stays, the more days destruction, total collapse of that country. So let's listen what they say, and we'll continue with other videos. Thank you again. There we go.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for being present for today's press conference on SR 800, addressing the humanitarian crisis that is occurring in Tigray, Ethiopia. We will start with an introduction from Senator Jackson, and we are glad to be accompanied by other elected officials in solidarity today, in addition to the Atlanta Jewish community. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to begin first by thanking Fana and Hassan, who are GLBC interns, who brought this issue to me and asked if I would help them to highlight the importance of this issue. And so to Fana and Hassan are great young people who are of Ethiopian descent, who've really said, we have to say something about this in these halls, in these places. I want to thank you all for bringing this to us. And then I also, before I begin my official remarks, want to thank the people all of the people here who have come out in honor of their family in order to highlight this issue. Friends, we have gathered here today to recognize the millions of people who are suffering in silence, the families, the friends, and loved ones, many of whom are my constituents. I'm grateful to be joined by fellow legislators, by constituents, by members of the Tigray community of Atlanta, which is based in my home district, District 41, and the many, many Georgia residents who are here in solidarity. This session, I sponsored Senate Resolution 800 calling for the unfettered humanitarian access to the millions of people of Tigray region of Ethiopia. The people of Tigray have been denied food. They have been denied water. They suffer in darkness. They have been cut off from the world. For some context, Tigray is a state located in the northern part of Ethiopia, which represents nearly 7 million people. As far as we know, there are currently 2 million people displaced within the country and over 60,000 Tigrayan refugees in Sudan. On November 4th of 2020, war was declared on Tigray, and ever since, the people of Tigray have been terrorized. This is an ongoing genocidal war, which has destroyed the region and caused great suffering both to those who are there and to their relatives who are here in the state of Georgia. If you are of a certain age, you may recall the images of children who were going hungry in Ethiopia. These were haunting images that became the face of starvation. Seeing these starving children moved us, and it moved our world to take action. Since then, many of the Tigrayan friends resettled in Georgia as refugees in the 1980s and 90s, fleeing the famine and civil war in their country and making this great state their new home. Now, some 3 decades later, here in 2022, we are seeing history repeat itself. Today, the families of our Georgia constituents and many millions others in Ethiopia are living in famine-like conditions and are at risk of perishing due to the starvation and the deliberate destruction of their healthcare system. According to most recent reports, between 80 and 90% of the Tigray hospitals and clinics are no longer functioning. The Tigray people in Ethiopia have no access to humanitarian aid for over 16 months. Aid workers have been killed. They face communication blackouts. My constituents, people here, they do not know whether their relatives are alive. They cannot call them or text them. They cannot email them. Most of us can never imagine how horrifying this experience must be. In spite of the ongoing suffering, sexual violence, and mass displacement in the humanitarian crisis of Tigray, despite all of that, it has received relatively little attention from our news media, from our international community, and very little attention under this great gold dome. But today, that changes. Today, we as members of the General Assembly are calling for the immediate restoration of electricity, of telephones, and internet service, which will be needed to facilitate the restoration of their healthcare system. Today, we are calling for the unfettered humanitarian access to the millions of people in the Tigray region of Ethiopia who are facing weaponized starvation. And we today are calling for the support for vulnerable populations, including refugees, internally displaced persons, victims of gender-based violence, and those who are displaced by this genocidal war in Ethiopia. We condemn the human suffering and displacement of the Tigrayan people. We condemn the ongoing violence and the egregious human rights abuses. Today, we stand in solidarity with the people of Tigray and with the Ethiopian immigrant and refugee community around the world and here in Georgia. Tigray should no longer suffer in silence. We see
Yes,
you,
that's right.
and today and forevermore, we stand with you. Thank you.
Excellent point.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. I am Senator Elena Parent, and I want to begin my remarks by expressing my heartache for the Tigrayan people and their families who are here in the state of Georgia. As leaders, we must stand for the basic rights of all citizens, and particularly for those who are facing injustice and oppression. Earlier this session, I introduced SR 668, a resolution that recognizes April 2022 as Genocide Prevention and Awareness Month at the state capitol and throughout the state of Georgia. I believe that it is imperative, as members of this body and citizens of this state, that we commit ourselves to becoming educated about the history of previous genocides and the occurrence of contemporary genocides. And we must focus our attention on the specter of genocide so that policies, strategies, and programs geared toward combating these evils can be developed and implemented. Further, we must ensure that we are making a conscious effort to commemorate the victims of genocide so that their unjust suffering may never be forgotten. And indeed, that we may prevent death during ongoing genocides and prevent future genocides. In Tigray, an estimated 500,000 people have died due to a combination of starvation and killings over the last 16 months. This amounts to nearly 1,000 people per day due to man-made famine and war, a truly unfathomable toll. War has prevented the passage of humanitarian aid, and as a result, starvation is being effectively weaponized against an estimated 7 million men, women, and children. The people of Tigray also remain under a communications blackout, cut off from the rest of the world. It's hard to even fathom not being able to reach one's family in these conditions for over a year. And my heart is with those standing with us today and those grieving across the Tigrayan diaspora. Our goal is to amplify the suffering of those in the Tigray region in order to advocate against the gross violations of human rights occurring and ensure that justice is provided. In 2011, the President of the United States declared the prevention of mass atrocities and genocide to be a, quote, core national security interest and core moral responsibility of the United States, and ordered the creation of the Atrocities Prevention Board in 2012. Thus, as members of the Georgia Senate, we are calling for immediate, unfettered humanitarian access across Tigray to allow for the delivery of life-saving food aid, medicine, and the full restoration of telecommunications, power, and banking services. We are in full support of the UN's ongoing human rights investigations in the region. We stand today with our Tigrayan constituents here in Georgia and their families. And now I would like to welcome to the podium individuals directly impacted by the ongoing genocide in Tigray.
Thank you, Senator Jackson and Senator Parent, for standing in solidarity with my family and my people. In 1983, my father resettled in Houston, Texas, before making a home in Georgia's District 41 as a refugee fleeing violence and famine in Ethiopia's civil war. At the time of his arrival in the United States, he immediately began advocacy work with the grassroots Tigrayan organization that had a chapter in Houston, and spent hours of his days recording VHS footage of the BBC's jarring report on the 1983 to 1985 Ethiopian famine. He distributed the tapes to local community and religious leaders in the area, hoping they would rush to donate and spread awareness. Almost 40 years later, and I am unfortunately in a similar predicament as my father, exhausting every possible option to advocate for my family deliberately being starved in Tigray. Many people, as Senator Jackson mentioned, who were old enough to remember the famine, still have the images of extremely malnourished children etched into their minds to this day. Although the famine began in 1983 due to counterinsurgency strategies implemented in the northern regions of Ethiopia by the Derg, Ethiopia's communist ruling regime at the time, 2 years passed before attention in the United States focused on the humanitarian catastrophe taking place. This attention eventually led to prominent individuals in the music industry like Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson to write the song We Are the World. And it led to the Great Live Aid concert, which garnered millions of dollars intended for African famine relief. If the U.S. government had been aware of conditions on the ground in Ethiopia for some time, it was not until journalists were able to share the stories of the famine that many Americans reacted. Journalist Michael Burke, in particular, managed to capture extensive and graphic footage of the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Ethiopia at the time, and groups all throughout the country also began to look for ways to make an impact on the situation in Ethiopia. For example, in May of 1985, the Los Angeles United School District spent 2 weeks pitting schools against each other to see which one would wind up on top as the #1 fundraiser for money to go towards Ethiopian famine relief. After being faced with graphic images of the famine, it became evident that people across the country understood the crisis in Ethiopia as little more than sending U.S. aid to end the maneuverings of the Ethiopian communist regime. And this did little to encourage a critical dialogue of U.S. policies and the role that humanitarianism played in their formulation. No one seemed to ask the critical question of why the U.S. knew about the famine conditions since '82 and chose to stand by as the death toll rose. Today, history is quite literally repeating itself in Tigray as the U.S. remains aware of the unfolding humanitarian crisis. I cannot adequately describe the crippling horror of wondering every moment of my day whether my family members have food and if they have starved to death. It is beyond cruel to cut an entire population of people off from the world in the midst of their darkest hours, leaving them unable to advocate for themselves and share the horrors that they face. It is why members of the Tigrayan diaspora, like myself and those gathered here today, have become relentless advocates, willing to do whatever it takes to amplify the suffering of our families and people. It is likely difficult for those of us living here in Georgia to imagine what starvation in the midst of a telecom blackout actually entails, when we live surrounded with more food options and social media apps than we can count. What many people don't realize is that starvation is a slow, painful process that begins with a severe lack of food over prolonged periods that lead the body's resources to be depleted. This results in substantial weight loss and wasting away of the body's tissues, in which it begins to feed on itself. Eventually, there's nothing left for the body to scavenge except muscle, including the heart muscle. In the late stages of starvation, many people often experience hallucinations, convulsions, and disruptions in heart rhythm before it eventually stops and they perish. This is happening to innocent children who deserve to learn and play, but are being subjected to a level of cruelty beyond comprehension as the world stands by. Children and their families who are made in the image of God, who have a sense of inherent worth and value that cannot be altered by any human being, and who are worthy of being fought for and advocated for. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being a parent in Tigray right now, watching your child slowly starve to death with no way to help them because you're starving too? An internal report from Tigray estimated that 3 million individuals in Tigray will perish in the next month if the international community does not intervene to open a humanitarian corridor with unfettered access to allow the flow of life-saving food and medicine. Although the current Ethiopian regime under Abiy Ahmed declared a humanitarian truce this past week, to many of us fighting for the people of Tigray, it is nothing more than an empty promise from a regime that wants to buy more time. Nearly a week after the humanitarian truce has been declared, aid trucks have still not entered the Tigray region, where even doctors are reported to be fainting of hunger on the job. It is up to the people here in this great state and across the globe to stand in solidarity with the people of Tigray through advocacy and civic engagement before millions of men, women, and children who are our families unnecessarily die from starvation. Many individuals and organizations who would love to support and care in this great state still don't know about the humanitarian blockade in Tigray and the resulting man-made famine that is completely preventable. And it is why we as a community are grateful for members of the Georgia General Assembly for standing behind Senate Resolution 800 and the awareness that it will bring. Our families cannot wait, and Tigray cannot wait. Thank you.
Okay, so okay, I'll come to the next video. That's the Georgia Assembly addressing the crisis in Tigray, specifically in Tigray region, is about 40 minutes long. So if you are interested, it's on YouTube. You can go ahead and finish it. So to save a little bit time for other news, I just cut it there. I apologize. So it's a very good achievement for the residents in Georgia, the Tigrayan community. Really, they are very strong, very strong. Convincing the Georgia Assembly to speak up on the issue they are facing. That's an achievement. So the Oromo communities, I know the Minnesota Oromo community, they are doing good, but the Oromo communities in Georgia, they should follow the example of these Tigrayan communities. I know there are too many over there. They should also organize and raise the issues, the Oromos, suffering different atrocities in Wallagga, Borana, Shoa, and different places. It's genocide in Oromia, especially in East and West Wallagga. Cut off from electricity, water, and internet, phone service. Just very tough to know how many people died, how many people's house burned, how many people burned alive while they are inside their house. Nobody knows. Sometimes the news leak out, but uh, in general, controlled by Abiy Ahmed administration. So the Georgian Oromo community, you should organize and speak on behalf of the Oromos suffering under Abiy Ahmed, and plus the Oromos living in other states. I think the Tigrayan communities are very smarter, stronger than Oromos. Really, they are tireless. They are dedicated, committed, day in the night, day in the night, to speak up, uh, you know, for their people. They did a lot. They did a lot, and they got the attention. So Oromos are too many around the world, and but the impact is not that much. I know there are so many Oromo advocating groups, organizations. They are doing, you know, reasonable jobs, but they need to act more through demonstrations, through advocacy, contacting their senators, congressmen, and like bringing the senators to speak up in just like this one. So thank you, the Georgia senators, for speaking up, for raising this very serious genocide, very serious crisis happening in Tigray region under Abiy Ahmed. And also I appreciate the Tigrayan community, their activities, their dedication without feeling tired, really, for the last year and plus. They did a lot of excellent job, uh, speaking up for their people. We are missing, the Oromos are missing this dedication. So thank you for that, and we appreciate. So the Georgian Assembly, please, if you have a chance to listen to me, please. Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed is under catastrophe, genocide, and no accountability for all crimes under this guy, and mass killing, just like the Karayu Bagadas killing, the senior religious cultural leaders, one time by the order of Prime Minister and by Oromia Regional Police Commissioner, killed in a spot, massacred, nobody accounted for. In the same way now, just like a couple of days ago in East Shore, 26 people. The next video is about that. 26 people. Nobody accounted for. Nobody. So many similar atrocities, genocide, and people just arrested and not appearing to court, and even released by the court, rearrested by the prime minister. So many grave human rights violations in Ethiopia. That's why I say, please act on based on humanitarian ground to remove these Prosperity Party officials before Ethiopia is collapsing. Ethiopia is destroyed. Ethiopians are being, destroyed by this Prosperity Party. Nothing is about prosperity, just killing, destruction, and the lack of accountability and other atrocities happening. So I hope they will shorten the life of Prosperity Party in that country, so Ethiopians will be free, independent, and flourish in justice, equality. So let's listen to the next video. Then I have a couple of news to read. Thank you again for joining me.
So the deadly attack took place, as you've said, between the Amhara and Oromia regional state, the two big states in the country, and the security force who were under attack were, undertaking routine surveillance works in that area, and they have been ambushed. And as we've said, security force, most of them have been killed. And the number of people now, the latest thing that we know, the number of the security force who've been killed is now increasing by the day. Some of them was been in a hospital, have also passed away, unfortunately, because of the attack, and others still remain in critical conditions. These kinds of attacks, by the way, were repeatedly seen in that area between the Amhara and Oromia regional states, intensifying the current peaceful situation into taking it into a different level, perhaps bringing people, the people-to-people relationship into a negative kind of situation, as these things are becoming deadly by the day. Properties are being destroyed. Complaints against the government force are also coming for not securing those areas. Civilians were also falling under attack so many times. So the latest thing that we know is that the government promised to bring those people behind this, the perpetrators, into justice, and they're working on it at the moment. They should be able to report perhaps in the coming couple of days. Hannah.
Here I'm talking about perpetrators. From what you're hearing, what was the reason for the attack, and is it known yet who's responsible for this?
Well, to answer your final question, who is responsible? In a nutshell, it has been explained. The government calls them extremists in the Amhara regional state who are trying to perhaps disrupt the normal livelihood, the normal activities, the people-to-people relationship between the Amhara and Oromia regional state people. So they have been expressed generally as extremists, armed groups who are behind this deadly attack, Hannah. But they didn't name them, and as I said earlier, they want to follow them up and bring them into justice. The activity was so cruel to speak on TV, by the way, as it was explained in the report. But we can generally tell you that this kind of acts are, if they continue, could lead to yet another bloodshed in this country. And analysts tell you they need to be addressed as soon as possible, as the government promised. They need to address them and bring those people behind it into justice so that things can calm down. But for now, really a stressful situation in that area because of the attack, Hannah.
Okay, so the government always escape the scrutiny, divert international attention just by saying they will bring these individuals accountable. They will investigate. Nothing. Zero investigation since Abiy Ahmed came to power. Nobody accounted for whether the artist Hachalu Hundessa killing, lawyer Abdul Jabbar Hussein, the military general, the engineer, the hydro dam engineer, so many, plus the 16 Karayu Abagadas, now the 26 people, and so many open and undercover killings, nobody accounted for. So Ethiopia is in a, in general, in a total collapse, Nobody's accounted, just the blaming game, the cover up continues, and Abiy Ahmed is still there in Arat Kilo, securing himself with a, National Guard. Nobody touch him, and the Ethiopians in general are silent. They don't account, they don't challenge him, and he tried to do now national dialogue, meaningless, senseless. I don't know what the end game. Nobody knows what the end game. And he want to consolidate his power. He don't care about all the bloodshed. So I hope the international community do something. I know they are doing, and but I think they should speed up to remove these guys. So thank you. Let's read a couple of others. The first one is again the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Tigray and Afar regions. This is from U.S. State Department, Anthony J. Blinken, Secretary of State. The United States welcome welcomes steps by the government of Ethiopia and the regional authorities to implement a cessation of hostilities. We commend them on the delivery of humanitarian assistance over recent days to Ethiopia in the Tigray and Afar regions. Over 100,000 Ethiopians will receive life-saving food from the two initial convoys that have mobilized in the past 3 days. This is an important step toward implementing the cessation of hostilities and addressing the urgent humanitarian needs in both regions. Now, we urge all stakeholders to make every effort possible to sustain the delivery of life-saving assistance. The United States appreciates the extraordinary efforts of humanitarian actors to enable this delivery of humanitarian assistance. Operating in a difficult circumstances across Ethiopia, humanitarian actors continue to show their agility, dedication, and commitment to serving those in need. We call on all parties in conflict-affected regions to ensure the safety of humanitarian staff. The United States supports and acknowledges the positive undertakings in this regard made by the government of Ethiopia and the regional authorities in Tigray and Afar. We urge all parties to build upon this positive humanitarian development to take the difficult next step to realize peace in northern Ethiopia. The United States will continue to do everything within our power to assist all Ethiopians in need throughout the country and support an inclusive political process to achieve progress toward common security and prosperity for all Ethiopians. So that is from U.S. State Department, encouraged by recent development in Ethiopia on humanitarian situation in Tigray. Okay, so this one, Ethiopia playing a constructive role in South Sudan. You see, it's okay to help the neighbors, but first you have to clean up your house. You have to be accountable yourself on the rules of the law at your house first. Where your house is messed up and you try to fix somebody's house, that doesn't work. So this is Ethiopia playing constructive role in Sudan crisis. But you should clean up your house first. You must be accountable for the law at home first. Ethiopia reaffirmed commitment to support implementation of South Sudan peace deal. The Ministry of Defense, Dr. Abraham Belai, leading a delegation to South Sudan, has delivered Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's message to President Salva Kiir Mayardit today. The minister expressed Ethiopia's concern as friendly country regarding the issue observed lately over the implementation of South Sudan's peace deal, further affirming his country's commitment to providing all the necessary support for the successful implementation of the deal. President Salva Kiir, on his part, appreciated the unwavering stance of Ethiopia to support peace and stability efforts in South Sudan, further extending appreciation for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's concern and initiative to sending a delegation to South Sudan. The issue observed recently in the country has roots in the complex nature of the implementation of the peace deal, the president said, reaffirming the proper handling of the case. President Kiir also briefed the Ethiopian delegation about the current state of the implementation of the peace deal. Dr. Abraham also had a meeting with First Vice President Riek Machar, where the First Vice President appreciated Ethiopia's role in bringing about the South Sudanese peace deal and called on Ethiopia to continue its support to the success of the deal. The Ethiopian delegation also met and discussed with uh, Tat Gatluk, President Kiir security advisor, and Angelina Teny, the Minister of Defense of South Sudan. It is okay to help the neighbors, but you have to help yourself, your people, to stop the genocide at home first before stretching your hand to the neighborhood. You have to abide by the rules of the constitution and help Ethiopians from dying, from all these atrocities happening under your leadership. So that's my message for. This is about United Nations March 31st vote on an independent investigation. Ethiopia failed at the United Nations on Thursday in its bid to block funding for an independent investigation into abuses in the country's conflict, garnering just 27 yes votes, while 66 countries opposed the move and 39 countries abstained. The vote was in the 193-member UN General Assembly's Budget Committee. The Budget Committee then voted to approve funding for the inquiry established by the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, December, to collect evidence and identify those responsible for abuses with a view to further persecutions. Ethiopia has vowed not to cooperate. Ethiopian diplomat Lemlem Fisaha Mnale told the Budget Committee ahead of the vote on Thursday, Ethiopia does not recognize this mechanism and it will have no access to Ethiopia. It has no intention or motive of advancing human rights. It is clearly and completely political, she said of the inquiry. The funding agreed for the inquiry was a compromise, diplomats said, and less than what the United Nations has requested. The United States affirms the importance of respecting and ensuring the implementation of decisions by the Human Rights Council as an intergovernmental body of the United Nations, said U.S. Ambassador for UN Management and Reform Chris Lu. Such mandates should not be undermined through budgetary decision, he told the committee before the vote. War broke out 60 months ago between Ethiopia's federal troops and forces loyal to the Tigray People Liberation Front (TPLF), which controls the Tigray region. Fighting spread last year from Tigray into the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions before the rebellious Tigray forces were pushed back. In November, a joint investigation by the state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN Rights Office found that all sides in Tigray conflict had committed violations that may amount to war crimes. Human Rights Watch UN Director Luis Charbonnet said the United Nations should get the investigation up and running. UN member countries sent a strong message to Ethiopia today that its brazen attempt to escape accountability for war crimes and other abuses by Defunding the United Nations human rights investigation is unacceptable, Charbonnet said. United Nations spokesman Stephen Dujarric said earlier on Thursday that the inquiry should be funded, adding that whether it is in Ethiopia or anywhere else in the world, human rights violations need to be investigated. Credit for this one, Reuters News Agency. So that's all I have for today's reading. So I don't know why the Ethiopian government refuse or try to block this United Nations investigative body. The Ethiopian government repeatedly claimed so many times on its media, even on other international media, TDF did so many atrocities. Claim. So why now, when the United Nations want to investigate all the claims, all the genocide, the rapes, and the other atrocities, property destruction in that country, why then now Ethiopia try to block it? There is something cooking, you know. They want to run away from accountability. I hope that will not happen. I hope they will be accounted. And the only thing is, the challenge we have is the Russian and the China and the United Nations. So nothing can be achieved through United Nations unless maybe through European Union or through the United States. That's the only thing. But through the United Nations voting, I don't think so. I don't think so. As long as China and Russia is in that Security Council, nothing will come up. That's why Ethiopia is now saying what you heard in this statement. Don't want to cooperate with the United Nations Security Council, Human Rights Council, the investigative body. They don't let them in. They don't want to cooperate because they want to hide from the crime. They don't want to get sued, brought to justice in International Criminal Court in The Hague. That's the target. That's the target. So they want to block the funding. They failed. Now the funding is available for this body. Now they say they don't want to cooperate. They don't allow them to come to the country. We will see. We will see. I hope there is another mechanism to do so. Either, by using Sudan or Kenya or wherever available, or Tigray, investigate and account for all crimes, including what the Eritrean soldiers did in Tigray, what the Amara Fano, the Amara militia, all the militias from all over the country, the Ethiopian army, and who ordered these atrocities, all these horrible crimes, and the burning of human being alive, dragging human being on the street. So many crimes. I hope they will be accounted. I hope the day will come when we can see justice served. So that's my message, and I would like to say Ramadan Kareem for those fasting. It's a fasting season. I hope this fasting season will be a blessing for all of us. And I hope no bloodshed in these months. I hope no war in Oromia. I know Abiy Ahmed is ready to wage a war. I hope he will restrain himself not to commit further violence, further genocide for his seat, for single seat, for this single seat. This guy in 2018 celebrated, welcomed, and considered as a savior. Now he's a criminal. He's a criminal. He's a criminal gang. Don't care about the law of the homeland and the international law. He doesn't care. So I hope no bloodshed for this Ramadan, and I hope he will restrain himself. I know he got so many soldiers getting ready to wage a war, especially in Oromia. and I hope the international community pay attention, control this guy just based on the humanitarian ground, as I said before. So also, you know, I just want to pass a note on the passing of one founding member of OLF, General, not General, Galasa Dilbo. You know, Galasa Dilbo was very well known in Oromo liberation movement, and he's sacrificed a lot, and thousands and thousands of Oromos paid in kind and in their lives to save him when the situation was tough, when the OLF was out from the transitional government. So many sacrificed for him because he was well respected, well loved commander and OLF, Oromo Liberation Army movement. So express my condolences to his family, his fellow friends, co-workers. You know, even though we have some regrets because he came back in 2018, just like others. You know, he joined the parliament, Ethiopian parliament, despite the suffering of his people under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed leadership. So he just got the power, the money, and forgot the original objective to liberate the Oromos from tyranny and all this killing, destruction. He ignored. He turned a blind eye. He joined the government, and so he became supporter of Prosperity Party because he, you know, that's all. All the commitment is revised. Money and the power changed everything. So except that, still I appreciate his commitment for Oromos movement in the past. He paid a heavy price, and Oromos also paid a heavy price to save his life. So that's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you again. Ramadan Kareem again. And please pray for peace, stability, freedom, justice in Ethiopia and all over the world. I will be back with other news and updates. So long, and see you again. Thank you.